Thank you very much. Great to be here. A very sobering presentation we just heard from the panelists. I believe just at the end, the gentleman from Amnesty International said that things were getting worse in some places. And I guess I'd like to make my brief remarks starting from that, because I would say this issue of religious persecution is getting worse around the world. It's not only coming from governments, although that's the usual source. It's coming from majority religions persecuting minority religions. I can guarantee you that this Sunday, in places all over the world, Christians will leave humble homes and walk long distances to go to a church someplace in Africa or Asia or the Middle East, knowing that when they walk in the doors of that church, that may be the last place they are alive on this earth. Because this Sunday, like every Sunday, there will be churches bombed, churches blown up, churches set on fire, churches attacked by people who will decapitate those worshiping in those churches. And it's not just Christians. The Shia will kill the Sunni. In India, Muslims and Hindus are at each other's throat. All over the world, anti-Semitism has slithered out from underneath its rock again. So in the great capitals of Europe, not that many decades after the horror of the Holocaust, there will be mobs marching in the streets of Paris and Berlin and London, chanting death to the Jews. There are Orthodox Jews being beaten on the streets of New York, which we are told is the most progressive, forward-thinking city in America. And yet the political leadership of New York is not able to come up with an adequate, serious response to what's happening. Just a few blocks from where we are right now, in the halls of Congress, anti-Semitism is being mainstreamed, spoken from the floor of the Congress. And when it comes time to condemn it, people play word games because they don't want one side or the other to get a political advantage from it. We've had 2 synagogues in the United States violently attacked in the last 18 months. And without getting deep in politics, it was only a couple of years ago where the entire weight of our own federal government was brought down on the heads of the little sisters of the poor. Unless they would ignore their own most deeply held views about the sanctity of life in order to be forced by their own government to participate in something that they found reprehensible. And then that's not even to mention the rising power in the world right now. You know, most countries in the world, the citizens of them don't get up in the morning and say to themselves, you know what would really be great for our country if we became a lot more like North Korea. Nobody says that. Nobody gets up in the morning and says, you know, I really think we should model ourselves after Syria. But ladies and gentlemen, there are countries in the world trying to decide whether to model themselves after the United States or after Communist China. Communist China has declared war on all religious faiths. They're putting Muslims in camps. They're going after not only the house Christian churches, but against the registered Christian churches. They're oppressing the Buddhists of Tibet. They're oppressing the Falun Gong. The message that the Chinese Communist government is sending is, if you have any loyalty above loyalty to the Communist Party of China, you are in trouble. And there are nations in the third world that are looking at the United States and China and saying, you know, the Chinese model may be the model we should follow. A couple years ago, when the Trump administration had the first ministerial on religious liberty, they invited countries from all over the world, and many countries accepted. But a funny thing happened as the conference was getting closer and closer. Countries started canceling out. Countries in Africa, Latin America, and other places started canceling out. Why? Well, the Secretary of State discovered that China was contacting countries they had made large loans to. And they were saying to those governments, you know, we notice you've signed up for this ministerial on religious liberty in Washington. That's not really a friendly act toward us. And by the way, you do remember that you owe us a lot of money. So I believe that the great conflict, the great competition of this century will be between the model being presented by Communist China and the model being presented by the United States to the rest of the world. So this is not a side issue. This is not something that's going to distract you from other important things. This will be key. Now, it was said, and I agree completely, that religious liberty is a human right. It's an international right. But I want to comment on just a couple of minutes, Martha, if I could take just a couple of minutes more. I want to comment on America's role in all of this. Because America cannot be America if it is not a major player in fighting against religious persecution. And I say that because the people that came to America were escaping persecution in Europe. The founders on the way to Constitution Hall, very learned men. They had read all about Greek and Roman political philosophy. They found a lot of ideas in those books that they used for the founding of America, the idea of the separation of powers and checks and balances. But that is not where they found the most important ideas of the American founding. These well-read men were reading the book this museum is dedicated to. They were reading the Torah, the Old Testament, and the most recent Testament, the New Testament. And it was there that they found the central ideas of the American founding. The idea that said, we are all made in the image of God. And that He is the author of our rights, not government. And being made in the image of God, then we all have dignity and value and worth. Whether you're a newborn with Down syndrome or a 95-year-old with senility, no matter what the color of your skin is or how much money you have in the bank, this country was based on the idea that you have dignity and value and worth because you were made in the image of the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Jesus. And they ended up putting this idea in the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, it means all mankind, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator, not by their government, by their Creator, with certain unalienable rights. Among these, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I am excited and pleased that we have a president and a vice president and a secretary of state that take these issues seriously. And I would urge each of you back in your communities and in your churches or your mosque or wherever you worship to talk about this fundamental issue, that every human being has a right to seek God and worship God as their heart and mind and soul tells them. And explain to your neighbors and the people you worship with that this century will be defined by whether the world accepts the model of communist China or the model of America built on equality for all. And if it chooses the model of China, the world will sink into another dark age. If it chooses the model embodied in our founding documents, then there is a good chance that this century will be a century of further progress, of peace, and of growing liberty. And that is good news for our children and grandchildren and for all of humanity. God bless you. Thank you very much.